All right, everyone, we're going to start with our last talk of the night and of Salty Sessions. To seal this 4-day Salty Sessions series, we're going to welcome with a warm round of applause for Sean Anderson, Department Head for Environmental Science Resource Management at Cal State Channel Islands, straight from New Orleans. Sean, take us to the Holy Land.
All right, thanks you guys. So Paul gave you guys all the great details. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our general attitudes about the coast from our fellow citizens and stuff. We'll do a little bit of a super short interactive thing. Probably go pretty quickly through these slides because it's late and you guys probably want to eat more pizza and drink more beer, which you should probably do. There you go, see. But I also have to say, so Paul started us off with these comments, and I wanted to follow up and say that I feel very lucky and very blessed to be in this community. You guys, many of us don't understand how special this place is. So when Paul was just, some of us do, but Paul was just talking about, Surfers Point. I've heard people talk about Surfers Point in Virginia, in Colorado, in Florida, and sometimes we get thinking that we're not making much progress in our little home here and there's, things going on. But the reality is the stuff we're doing here in Ventura with everything from SOAR, condor conservation, all these things are really amazingly forward-thinking, so many of them. And it's easy to get frustrated that we're not going as fast as we want, but you should be very proud of the place that we call home, and we do some amazing things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about public attitudes, but I also have to say thanks to my students. So most of this stuff that I'm going to tell you about was all collected via my students, including the Salty Sessions that was a product essentially of that. So one of my students was in here surveying people, and John was like, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's like, "We're looking at public attitudes." Like, "Well, you should come talk about public attitudes." And that was one of the nucleating ideas for doing this session. So I'm very happy and very proud to be here and very happy to be in a place that creates community. There's a lot of silliness going on in our world right now that's about breaking communities apart. It's really cool to be in a place that builds community, one, and builds community with beer, two. So that's good stuff. So this is a picture of Ventura. This picture right here, and there's a bit of fog. And I think a lot of times when we talk about some of our challenges here on the coast, it's not exactly clear what's going on. It's sometimes hard to see through that fog. And so we've been doing, in addition to all of our regular research, we've been doing social science research. We've been looking at public attitudes for several years here at Cal State Channel Islands, and so I want to talk about that. Now, if you've had too much entropy or whatever else you're having, and you're totally loopy and going, catatonic, you can just look at this and then you can go home, right? So this is, what we found is that through our polling, and I'll show you some data in a second, but we've been doing this for about 12 years or so now. And what we found is that a lot of our community values the scientific work that my students do, that I do, that our colleagues do, that a lot of you guys do. Sometimes in the media, that's not, you don't get that impression, but truly here in our South Coast here, people really do appreciate that. We tend to know about problems in the vague sense. We tend to not be so great at actually putting numbers on things. And in general, many of us see our environment as on a downhill slope. As things are getting worse compared to what it was back in the day. And when we talk about specific management efforts, like taking down Matilaha, like doing a plastic bag ban, we tend to not be as familiar with those things. We tend to feel very confident when we talk about stuff at the very general level, but people lose their confidence or aren't sure what's going on when we get to the specific, oftentimes. So now you guys can go to sleep and you know everything. This right here is an example of how things have changed. and the reason why it's important to look at how things have changed. So on the left-hand side right there, that's what we used to call a black sea bass, what we now call a giant sea bass. And that lady caught that fish off Magoo Pier. Magoo Pier, you say? We used to have a pier at Magoo until 1923 when a hurricane took it out. On Saturdays, it was full, packed full of people fishing. And that lady right there in that black dress with all her hoop skirts and everything, the title on this photo was "A Typical Saturday Catch at the Magoo Pier." That's about a 400 some odd pound fish right there. On the right is a white sea bass, and then below it are folks out at Catalina surfing. So things have changed. And if we don't measure stuff, whatever that stuff is, quantitatively, it can be easy to forget or to lose track of what's been going on. And one of the things my students and I do a lot is figure out how to measure things and do some measurement. Now, what I'm going to talk to you today is some of the data that we've been collecting through opinion polls. These opinion polls have been going on for quite some time, but the point is, this began as a class activity. So our still relatively baby university, California State University, Channel Islands, we've only been around for about a decade, a little more than a decade or so, depending on how you want to measure our start date. We've tried to re-envision what a university experience is and what a university education is. And one of the things we've done is embed research throughout, especially in our program, throughout all these things. So this project started with an education effort. It was not to do research, it was to give my students a better handle on coastal energy, wetland restoration, all these things, so that when we talked about them in class, they would have actual, true understanding of what the general public thought, not what the old bald dude thought at the front of the class, right? And that has evolved over time. So the short version is we do this poll every February. Or excuse me, every February. Jeez, I've had too much entropy, apparently. Every fall, we do it in Santa Barbara County, Ventura County, and northern Los Angeles County. So it's great. We go to public places we can publicly go to, like Leashless right here. They go to beaches, they go to car washes, they go to all kinds of places, parks, etc., post offices, and we survey the public. We only go to a maximum of 25 people in any one location any year. And we have this survey. Again, it was created as a teaching tool. We used it for a couple years, and then we started getting requests from folks like you guys, the Park Service, all these different entities saying, hey, can you share that data with us? And we said, oh, no, it's not a research thing, it's just a little class project. I said, yeah, we have nothing. So if you can give it to us, and I was like, whoa, wait, let's fix it a little bit. And so we did a little bit of an adjustment, and now it's a really robust data set that can help a lot of you guys, as well as our local land managers, et cetera, get a sense for how the public thinks of various things. So this is our survey tool. Too small, forget that. You can't read that, who cares? It's silly stuff. It basically says that the population that we sample is pretty close to the general public. So the average resident in our 3 counties, we do a fairly okay job in most of the things. The one thing we don't do too well is we oversample the college-educated folks. But other than that, we do a fairly good job of male-female breakdown, however we want to slice the population. This is our data. So far we've surveyed about 13,000 people over the last several years, so it's a really robust data set. And then what each line there is showing you is how the survey instrument has evolved, and we've changed it over the years, but we really revised it heavily in 2007 when we got requests. So in 2008, pretty much since 2008, we've hit close to 600 to 1,500 people each year, more typically around 1,000 people. The questions have evolved. Some questions wink on in our survey, some questions wink off. So what do you think about Fukushima, and how did that change your opinion of coastal management? Other things are asked every year, the same exact question, so we have a nice baseline, and we can look at how things change over time. Okay, so I've been talking, but now I'm going to stop talking for a second. So before I go on and tell you about some of the stuff we've found, I want to give you guys we'll just take a couple minutes here, but I have some things to hand out to you, And I want you guys, if you have a pen, that's great. If you don't, you can just look down. I want you to make some guesses. So I have some blank sheets here. These sheets are questions. Every gray little area, you guys, Monica, you pass that out, thanks, is take a look at that. And we're going to take just a quick 3 minutes, so pause, I'll be quiet. And you can do it yourself. You can do it with your family. You can do it with your neighbors. See if you can fill in an answer for each one of these things. So the first question is, for example, do you think climate change is a serious problem? What percentage of our community here do you think said, yes, it is, no, it isn't, or unsure, etc.? So that's the first couple questions. On the bottom, the last few questions says, oh, geez. Again, I've been drinking too much entropy. It says your idea beach. It should say your ideal beach. But the idea there is your ideal beach, in terms of people, few people or lots of people? Is your ideal beach one with sand, one with rocky? And all these things most of these things should sum to 100%. So that's the idea. So I'll take 3 minutes. You guys take a look at those, make some guesses, and we'll pick it up in about 3 minutes.
While we're waiting for these 3 minutes, it has been noted that this idea of a speaker series has been in development. It was something I always wanted to use the brewery as a vehicle to affect positive change. But there was this one person, fall of 2017, who came at night, and it was what the hell? And she got this whole concept moving like a snowball when it was going to be shelved for a while, and she happens to be sitting here. So because this is going on YouTube, come up here. Congrats.
Hi, my name is Camila Guzman. I'm actually a student of Dr. Anderson's at California State University, Channel Islands, over in Camarillo. I did come here this past fall for his coastal management class that he has us do. We do 60 surveys, each individual student, around the Ventura County, Los Angeles County, and Santa Barbara counties, talking about seafood and coastal management issues. So I came in here on a Tuesday night, a really random night, but I was getting closer to the deadline, and a couple of classmates were like, you should try breweries, there's so many people that want to talk to you. I think Monica was really the one that was like, you should just go to the brewery. And I was like, okay, I'll try, but I don't know. And I came here with really open arms. There wasn't many people here, but I just was able to talk to people, and that was really nice to have a venue just to bring community together about really important issues in our community. So, yeah, that's why I'm glad to support this. Yeah, thank you, John, and everyone, and Dr. Anderson. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. All right, I'll give you guys another minute or two, and you can jot down, or make your guess if you don't have a pen. You can just mentally make your guess, and then we'll go on in a sec.
Hey, tell us what you're doing in New Orleans.
What was I doing in New Orleans? So, I moved down from Stanford 2 weeks before Hurricane Katrina hit. And my lab at Stanford, I had boats and people and resources and things. And moved down. My son was about 2 years old. My wife came down. My wife was also hired to the campus. And all of a sudden, we were watching what was unfolding on the television and on the radio and on the newspapers with New Orleans, with Hurricane Katrina striking New Orleans. And long story short, our students raised a bunch of money to send to the Red Cross, and then they said, you should take us. So every year since, we've been taking students to New Orleans. We spend about half our time doing wetland restoration, half our time installing food gardens, and we embed with the community, and we meet with chefs and Pulitzer Prize winners and jazz musicians and all that good stuff. So that's where I've been the last little bit. We're not there during Jazz Fest, but we kind of make our own Jazz Fest. So most nights we're out at different clubs and different music venues, but we do it in March. So I got back about 2 weeks ago. That's where I got this cool jacket. Yes, it's true. It is true. Data entry time. All right. So you guys can keep guessing if you want, but since everybody's been drinking their beers and all that excellent stuff, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so I'll show you the data in a couple minutes, but let's talk a little bit about what we found with this, and I'll run through a couple quick results. We have, dozens and dozens of questions that we've asked. I don't have time to go through, so if you guys want to ask me when we pause, I'm happy to answer questions. I want to give you the mile-high overview, though, right now. So our most recent survey this past fall, we surveyed not quite 1,500 people. Our questions are broken down into a series of categories. Some are just, what do people know about science? Some are about, what do people know about the existing conditions of our coast? A large chunk are devoted to management. What do you think about this management? How have we done? What's good? What's bad? What's the setting that we find ourselves in? And then there's a few questions about behaviors. What do you do? And then there's several demographic questions, which are mostly so that we can understand if we're doing a decent job sampling our population here. Okay, so now that you've answered that question, I want to tell you that is Paul. That is Paul Spar. It's one of those are several of our students, some that are about to graduate, some that already have graduated. But I want to first just start off showing you some of the value of this data. So I'm a scientist, and I'm trained as a scientist, and sometimes natural scientists look down a little poo-poo the social scientists, and like, they don't do something as kick butt as we do. But the reality is all this stuff is important, and at our university we consider it all together in this so-called interdisciplinary approach. So the example I'm going to show you real quick is this is Refugio, right? This is the Refugio oil spill 2015, and it happened. We have a large Dr. Patch was here. She's one of our beach experts. We do a lot of work looking at the health of our beaches. And so it just so happened, school had just ended in 2015, and we were, I given my students 2 weeks off and said, okay, go disappear, go camp, go sleep or whatever, and then we're going to come back in June 1, and start our sampling. I took my son to his Boy Scout troop meeting, and I got a phone call like, what is this? And they said, they want to talk to you about the oil spill. I'm like, what oil spill? The oil spill's going on right now. I was like, what? Long story short, by the rise of the sun the next morning, a huge number of us, some of which are in the room, some of these folks are in the room, we ran up and we started monitoring our sites early. And so we have some of the best data, some of the first data on the Refugio oil spill. And so we spent the next month and a half sampling beaches up and down the coast. When these dramatic events happen, we tend to focus on the sexy things, the things that are real popular, things like the dolphins that are hurt, the marine mammals that are hurt, and that's absolutely part of the story. But the real ecological story is less news headline worthy. So in this case, we saw what we feel is a huge impact to a lot of our small critters, like our sand crabs and stuff, where this tar was washing up right in the strand line. Other things you don't necessarily see, like grunion eggs in these vulnerable populations that were right where this tar was coming ashore. The tar was, there's a whole other talk. We need to have several gallons of beer to fully have this conversation. But very sporadic, very much so unusual for a quote-unquote typical oil spill. Really patchy. You get a bunch of stuff here, and then nothing, and then a bunch of stuff there, nothing. So it was very different. We had to do our own measuring of what was a heavily oiled beach, and we did. And we're natural scientists, so we went and we sampled things like how poisonous is this stuff to the little critters in the sand. We did all that stuff. I can tell you about it. Long story short is it screwed up a bunch of stuff. So a lot of little critters, little babies, little larvae were impacted by this stuff. And so we can talk about that, but that doesn't necessarily get the attention of some of our elected officials and managers and stuff. But instead of just doing that, we actually modified this survey that I'm talking to you guys about today. We did a quick modification, and we went around on our beaches. Every beach that we were sampling for oil, for the critters, all this and that, we also did some surveys. We ended up sampling 33 different beaches, both with the social, human, economic side of the picture, as well as the ecological, geomorphological, et cetera side of the picture. And this is a person who, for legal reasons, I have to blur out her face, but this is somebody in sort of a weird LSD-induced whatever the hell, a survey. And so our students are out there in the background counting the critters in the sand, et cetera. She's telling us about her impressions as this event was actually unfolding. And so one of the things we saw is this. So for example, in this survey, we asked, and so on the x-axis here, this is how much tar is at this particular beach. So 0 means there was no tar, it was a clean beach. And on the far right-hand side, 6 is a heavily tarred beach. Lots of tar everywhere, thick tar, etc. And so we go from lightly tarred to heavily tarred. On the y-axis is how far did that particular person drive or travel to get to that beach. And there's some statistics here. We don't care about statistics. We're having entropy. The answer is there's no significant difference. People drove as far to get to the clean beach as they drove on average to get to the beach that was messed up with oil. So, okay, fine. But then if you ask another question was how much did you spend this past week at the beach, or how much were you going to spend in the coming week at this beach, that was heavily affected by the amount of tar. So people still came to the beach, but once they got there, if it was tarred, they were, surprise, surprise, they were like, this sucks, I'm not gonna hang out here, I'm gonna leave. And so that means our hotels, our breweries, our surf spots, our restaurants, all those communities were impacted. And it turns out nobody really has this data, but we do. So again, the value of coupling this survey data that we're talking about with other stuff leads to a lot, much deeper insights and is much more effective to argue for these things that we're concerned about than if we were to only have, say, the animal data or the oil data, et cetera. And then just keep on this theme before we get back to the regular stuff, just tell you a little bit about the Refugio Spill. So we've been asking about people's attitudes towards seafood for some time. And so in this case, this is, so the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf Coast happened in 2010. In the April of 2010, actually my students had just come back from New Orleans, and a colleague and I from Oregon State, John Lambrinos, had just went out, were invited to go have a meeting, the anniversary of this big restoration thing, and then 4 days after we left, the Deepwater Horizon happened. So that happened in the springtime. This survey data I'm showing you here is all from the fall. So by 2010, this is essentially on the y-axis is, do you trust the seafood to eat? So on the bottom is you don't trust it at all. At the top of the graph, you trust it a lot. And what happened was 2010, people were not very, if you said, do you want to eat seafood from the Gulf of Mexico? People were saying like, hell no, right? No way. And it took a long time. It took until about 2015 for that aversion to relax. So this one event had a huge impact. If you were a fisherman or had a processing plant, and you were impacted for years. That's the typical story. With the Refugio spill, it was not like that. This is our data from the Refugio spill. So the Refugio spill, we've been asking for a while, what do you think about California seafood? No impact. People with the Refugio spill, no effect. We started asking specifically about, are you worried about Santa Barbara seafood? Santa Barbara Channel seafood was the red triangle. And right when the spill happened, people said, yeah, it's not so good. Within 3 months, people didn't care. So it turns out the effect of the Refugio spill on businesses and on the perception of the cleanliness of our coast, that was different from most of our oil spills. It was very fleeting. And by the time the fall rolled around, people didn't care. They were going to the beaches. So this data can be helpful in those kind of contexts as well. Okay, value of that. Let's talk about what we find with our surveys. So we can talk about all kinds of stuff, but tonight, since we're going long, I'm just going to highlight our beach-specific stuff. What do people perceive about our beaches? How do we think about our beaches? Yeah, question.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
About the Gulf of Mexico?
Yeah.
So is the test based off perception over here, or is it the perception of the people who live off the Gulf?
Great question. So the question is, with that data I just showed you, when people said, I don't trust that seafood, who is it? All of this survey is Santa Barbara, Ventura, LA County. So this is all our perception.
Could you make an argument that if you live closer to where the contamination is, you become more like numb to the effects of that contamination? So people maybe at the Gulf of Mexico, like living closer to where this village was, eventually it would have the same kind of perception as what we did for Santa Barbara. Because it's kind of like the denial
Sure.
of the community.
Sure, yeah, so the question is, so is the fact that that we were like, oh, it's no problem from the Refugio Spill just because we're so proximate and we really want it to be better. We're really hoping it to be better. Some of that probably definitely is going on. But the Refugio is probably a different phenomenon because typically with these events, there's the epicenter and then things dribble out. Here, because it was so heterogeneous, it really, the reaction was very different. So for example, you could go to San Juan Road and talk to people, and so we were out there surveying. And so one beach, people come up to us and go, what the hell's going on? This is like baloney. Nobody's talking about all this oil that's everywhere. And the people were absolutely enraged. Like, you're not telling us the truth. Because we wear safety vests, so people think we're the man. When in reality, I'm just the bald man. I'm not that man. And so some people are like, why don't you tell us the truth? And then we'd literally go a half mile away to another beach, and people would be saying, this is totally ridiculous. You guys are saying there's an oil spill. It's like, there's no real oil spill. Our beach is totally clean. So it really was, it was your very highly localized perception of the event. So it wasn't like the 69 oil spill. It wasn't like the Thomas Fire, for that matter, where there's this huge swath and everybody really understands what's going on. People had very different understanding or personal experience with the oil, and that led them to to distrust the media in most cases for different reasons, though. Whereas the phenomenon you're talking about absolutely happens, but it was a bit different. It was a bit different between us and them. I think so the question is, so is this a factor of perception or the media? And first and foremost, it's people's perception. It's their own experience of the disaster. Did their house get burned, or did the oil hit their surf spot or whatever? But the media absolutely, I would say, is a magnifier of that personal opinion. Typically, it seems to be. Absolutely. Right. 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 Right, and so the question is, the Deepwater Horizon was the largest marine spill in U.S. history, right? Whereas our spill in 2015 was bad, but it was several truckloads full. It wasn't the same scale, and that I think is the main driver of this. Yeah. In addition to the heterogeneity. All right, cool. So anyway, we ask a bunch of things. We ask about behaviors and how people move around and all that kind of good stuff. So here we go. So again, this is for Santa Barbara, Ventura, northern LA County. What we find is 40% of us go to the coast, when we define the coast as within 10 miles of the coast, go to the coast at least weekly. And most of these people are responding as if, in terms of follow-up discussions, most people perceive this question as going to the beach. But still, so almost half of us go weekly. If we ask monthly, 3/4 of our residents in these 3 counties go to the beach, go to the coast. So this coast is a very important part, as we know here, but is a really important part of our culture, how we recreate, how we relax, all that good stuff. We also ask, what's the last natural place that you visited, before today? And 75, and so that's an open-ended question. They could say the mountains, they could say Yosemite, they could say whatever, their local neighborhood park. The vast majority of them talk about a place here in Southern California, and way more than half of them, it's the beach. So the last open space. So more than their neighborhood park, more than the Santa Monica Mountains, more than the Los Padres, whatever it is. So the beach, again, is really, really important. What do our local citizens, what do people do when we go to the beach? Mellow activities, hiking, having some food, etc. That is really, really common. All of those things you see there, hiking, eating, drinking, playing exercises, are every single year, more than half the people say that when they go to the beach, that's what they do. And again, let me just reiterate, this is not, while we do surveys at the beach, these are surveys across the county. In Moore Park, in Santa Paula, in the Valley. These surveys aren't done at the beach. But again, this notion of the coast and the beach keeps showing up, Expensive things that you need a decent amount of money to do, say ride a horse or whatever, Those tend to be relatively rare, on the order of about 15% or fewer people do those comparatively expensive things to do, and that would include some kind of mechanized vehicle, off-roading or riding motorcycles, that kind of stuff, sailing, etc. Yeah.
Do you know about, I think I've heard from Ventura Harbor, like, does, like, lessons, they subsidize lessons. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so the question is, so horse, riding a horse or sailing or whatever, there absolutely are engagement programs, summer camps and things like that, which are great. So those definitely help folks that maybe don't have the same financial means do that activity, but that's a minority of the overall people that are sailing. Most people that are sailing are on a sailboat, not part of a camp or a training thing. But yeah, but good point. What we've seen, and this is a real disturbing thing to me, and this is a broad pattern throughout our society, fewer and fewer people are hunting, fishing, however you want to define that, spearfishing, and that's unfortunate in my opinion. Some of the strongest conservation legislation, policies, advocacies have come from hunters. Not the hunters that travel to Africa to blow away a lion and then go to the White House, not those kind of folks, but folks that truly are into hunting and fishing and being out in nature, understanding the rhythms. Those are some of the best conservation professionals I've ever encountered. Those folks are becoming less and less in our society as we become a more urban population. Yeah, okay. General context, about a third of us eat seafood weekly. Eats some amount of seafood. And again, if we talk about monthly, it's way more than half. About 65% of us eat some amount of seafood at least monthly. We eat a lot of seafood, and that's one of your questions, but I'll get back to that. But we eat about 5 ounces. A deck of cards is about 3 ounces, so we eat about more than a bit more than a portion on average per week. But 2/3 of us rarely or never ask where that stuff comes from. So we're grabbing stuff and throwing it in our mouths and our bodies, but we don't know if it was relatively sustainably harvested. We don't know if it was harvested in a totally, messed up fashion or whatever. And that's a simple question. That's something everybody here can do, right? So, hey, where did this stuff come from? And we don't typically do that. I'm going to skip those for the next one. Okay, so here we go. So here's one of the take-home points for you guys. And it's how do we see the threats to our coastal zone? So there's three things here. The threats to our coastal fisheries, there are threats to our general coastal zone, surfing, all that kind of stuff together. And then threats to our coastal wetlands, because those are a discrete thing we can talk about. And this is kind of a weird, nerdy professor graph, so don't worry about it. I'll explain to you. So we asked people to rank these threats, number 1 being the greatest threat. So they're asked to rank, number 1, number 2, number 3, etc. So on the left, you read that as people think that's the greatest threat, the highest threat. As we go to the right, that's something that's not as worrisome to people. And what we see, whether we're talking, and there's different categories here, but there's pollution, habitat fragmentation, invasive species, etc. The take-home point is the point that's always to the left of this, in this case, the red dot, is pollution. So when we ask people, what is the threat? Everybody says pollution, 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 pollution. And this has been going on since the 70s when folks have asked this question and looked at this. People always say pollution is the problem, and to be sure, pollution is a real problem, it's something we need to deal with. But many of our studies suggest that there are other things that are at least as rising to the same level of concern, if not greater, but yet the general public still seems to really be fixated on pollution. And so again, that we see that time and time again in different ways. Next question, when we ask the general public, are we as a big whole, we as a collective we, are we doing a good job managing our coast? And again, consistently, we see the most common response is no. So most people say, no, we're doing a poor job of that. Way more people say no than say we're doing a good job. and then there's a similar amount of people that just don't know. So those two numbers should be of concern to us. So we don't know if we're doing a good job, but if we're forced to say yes or no, most people say we're doing a poor job. If we talk about what agencies are you okay, this is another confusing professor graph. So back in the day, and then as we go to the right, going through time with our responses. These are, you probably can't read in the back, but these are different agencies. And all the question says is, have you heard of this agency that does something about our coastal zone, manages something about our coast? Surprise, surprise, the number one most common thing from year to year, it waxes and wanes a little bit, but the most, and this is on a proportional scale, so it's 100% on the top to 0 on the bottom. The Coast Guard, everybody's heard about the Coast Guard, right? Yay, firefighters, yay, great, right? They do awesome stuff. As we come down, the next most common thing is the Coastal Commission. Not surprising, we live on the coast. People seem to have heard of the Coastal Commission. And then for most of the years, once we drop below the Coastal Commission, most of those other things, NOAA, boating and waterways, all these agencies that have a potentially huge effect on how we manage our resource, less than half of the population on average seems to have heard of these entities. So that's an interesting thing. Again, as we start to ask more specific questions, people get less sure of themselves. When we ask about the creation of Channel Islands National Park, when we ask about plastic bag bans, etc., unsure blossoms, and people tend to be less sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, on average. And so, for example, if we ask people, hey, how are we doing managing fishing in our California waters? Are we over-regulating it, which is about a fifth of the people say that? Are we doing it about right, which is about a third? Are we under-regulating it, which is also about a fifth? Or unsure? And about 40% of people say we're unsure.
Isn't that a reasonable response given that we don't really know in terms of the system's effect?
Okay, sure. So the question is, isn't it reasonable to say we're unsure? And the answer is yes. But remember, most people are still saying, are we doing a good job? And when we ask the general question, they're like, no, we're doing poorly. But then when we ask the specific, then they're like, well, yeah, but I don't know. And so that's important because many times our policies, or the way we approach policies is people say we either need to do something or not do something. It's asked at the general level. So the take home is, you're right. If we're talking about Matilaha or whatever it is, and we want to talk about a specific topic, we're going to probably need to educate our population a bit more, right? So that's a key take home, I would say, from this.
Well, and to the larger point, who knows for sure what the outcome of our intervention is going to be?
Sure. But you could make the same argument for the economy. You can make the same argument for all these things. So I agree, but we seem to have a higher level of uncertainty with environmental things than for other policy choices. But you're right. We don't know what the banking regulation is going to do. We don't know what the... Absolutely. There's a lot of uncertainty in this whole thing. You are totally correct. Let's skip this because, we don't care about that. So here's the question is, we ask, what do we think about seafood? So the seafood that we might ask about, or that we might receive on our plates here or in the store or what have you. And so, again, another confusing graph. But these are different areas we ask about. Alaska, China. So is seafood coming from Alaska safe or not? Is seafood coming from China safe or not? And just to orient you, the light purple, people say, yes, it's safe. It's relatively safe to eat. The no is this light purple. And then well, I'm not sure if it is or isn't, but I'm neutral is the magenta bright purple. And then on the far right, that's the I don't know. That's the I'm unsure. And what's that?
What's China up to?
People don't believe stuff from China is safe to eat. Surprising. I know that's I love to have more formaldehyde in my toothpaste, but but what I would suggest to you is, one of the reasons people say Alaska is so safe is because of an entity called the Alaska Seafood Marketing Council. They spend millions of dollars every year to put pictures in front of you about really pretty, pristine cold and like manly men, it's mostly men, on the boats, and they're pulling in crabs, and it's very clean. That is absolutely a campaign to get you to think of this place as clean and safe and robust. Not about the management, not how well those fish stocks are doing, but it's robust and et cetera. But I'll just say real quick to give you a sense of this. So you can come here, you can take, for example, the yeses and the nos, and we can do a ratio of that. So are people on average more trusting or less trusting? And we can create numbers out of this. And so we can create ratios. So the bigger the number, people are on average more trusting of that seafood source. The lower the number, the less we're trusting, and less we have faith in that's a safe thing to eat, that item coming from that location is. And so, in general, the green dots, people are more positive than negative. And that's Gulf of Mexico, and this is in 2016. Gulf of Mexico, Norway, our Santa Barbara Channel, our local Santa Barbara Channel, California outside the Santa Barbara Channel, Alaska. People on average are like, yes, way more people think, even if they were to ask where it comes from and someone were to tell them, they'd be like, good. The red, Japan, which is driven by Fukushima. Thailand and China, on average, people say, no. If you told me that was from Japan and I had a choice, I would on average not choose to eat that seafood. And when we add it together and then look over time, what we see is there's ups and downs. And so Alaska, even though Alaska is positive, it fluctuates a fair amount. It still is always the most safest item of the stuff we ask for. So there's interplay. And it turns out the interplay there, a lot of that is media in terms of what's driving people's perceptions. Okay, in terms of what's going on economically, in terms of our coast, the average that and this is just from this data here, I'm just showing you the 2016 data, but most people say they spend at the coast $405 per week. Now, that's an underestimate, and yes, people spend more than that. The variance there is over $2,000. So what that tells you is some people are spending a ton of money at the coast. Some people aren't spending that much. But even though this number is an underrepresentation, because we ask the question the same way every year, it's a really nice indicator that we can look over time and see how things change. But on the order of hundreds of dollars, people are actively spending. If we ask people, and so again, this gets to the question earlier about stuff. This is a question we started asking about 4 or 5 years ago because it was a question that's being asked in other surveys. Do you think our economic system is rigged in favor of certain groups versus other groups? 2/3 of our population say that our economy is rigged, meaning that they can't get better, or that the wealthy folks are going to be getting better. If we talk about what should we value, again, this is the general public. What should we value in terms of nature? The most common answer is beauty and aesthetics. So a beautiful beach matters a lot to Joe Blow. But ecology, uniqueness, we could call that rarity. Ability to recreate, endangered species, all of that stuff, more than half of the public think that that's something that should go into the calculus. Economics, in terms of how we, traditional economics, in terms of how we value the coast, that's the only thing that we've ever measured for all the years that is less than half. So while in some circles people would say we must put a dollar value on this coastline or on this dam, and there's absolutely a reason to do that and value to do that, but the vast majority of the public don't think that should be taken into effect when we talk about the value of this particular landscape or whatever. Some people do, but on average, less than half of our community thinks that's an important thing. Okay, some of the questions you guys were asking about. So I'm curious, what did you guys say in terms of your beach? What was the age that you guessed most people first went to the beach? 46? 5? And I don't remember. Okay, there you go. I was too young. So 4.7. 4.7 years. This is primarily driven by the fact we have a lot of folks that think we're an awesome place and move here. So if you ask if you actually talk to them and find out people that grew up here, most folks, it's less than 1 for our local residents, less than 1 year of age. So even with all of our immigrants coming into our community that didn't grow up in a coastal area, before they start school, they're at the beach. So this beach community is fundamentally important to the formation of our community's childhood, in addition to all these other great things. People will will go a long distance to visit the beach. And then here's another one. Here's the other question. So how frequently do people go to the beach? 13% of us go every single day, or say they go every single day. And just so you guys understand, this light number here is how many people actually answered that number. And then on the bottom, that's doing a running sum, or that's adding all the stuff up. So for example, 13% of the people go daily, 27% go weekly, but then underneath weekly it says 40%. That's because that's saying go at least weekly. That's weekly or daily, etc. So if we use that bottom number, 2/3 of us go to the beach monthly, and virtually everybody goes at least a few times a year. Again, this beach thing is not just a random deal, but it's fundamental to our community's DNA, fundamental to our economic stuff, fundamental to how we conceive of ourselves as a people. It's not just some random place. The coast is really, really important to who we are as a people. Yeah, question?
Yeah, it seems like these results are extremely localized to people who have paid a lot of money to live within a certain short distance of the beach. If we were to go inland to Fillmore, South Wales, Rio, and even eastern offshore, I think you'd find these numbers extremely different.
Sure. So the question is, does where people live matter? And the answer is, we can answer that because we actually ask people their zip code. So it turns out that yes, of course, as you go farther inland to Bakersfield, et cetera, it's going to go down. But this is surprisingly robust throughout the county. So of course, someone that lives at Pierpont is going to go more often than the person that lives in Santa Clarita. But the people in Santa Clarita go to the beach and incredibly go a lot. So the phenomenon you're talking about is real, but we are a coastal people.
Okay, I think maybe what I'm getting at is the socioeconomic aspect to it. Foundation that I work with educates youth that are underrepresented at the beach. In fact, many of these kids have never been to the beach, and they're in junior high and high school.
Right. So let me wait. Where's my thing here? Where's my thing here? I didn't have it in here. So I guess I didn't put it in. So one of our questions is that we've started asking in recent years is, have you avoided going to the beach because you feel unwelcome? Either some surf guys are throwing rocks at you, or it's just people that don't look like you, right? And so the answer that we find there historically has been around 15% of people say that they have avoided going to the beach or a particular beach because they either felt threatened or didn't feel like going there. We've been trying to do the same thing in our public parks and things. And so anecdotally, one of the organizations I sit on, we've been getting a lot of reports particularly since 2016, since the election, that so beaches should be one of for everybody, right? They're either free or comparatively cheap, way cheaper than going to the movies, way cheaper than doing many of the things going to the Dodger game, cheaper than many of the activities we could be doing. The little bit of data we've been able to collect suggests that there's a markedly different, people are not going as much as they used to go just in the last 18 months. And so people report feeling not safe in these public places. And that absolutely is related to a socioeconomic condition and racial condition and that kind of stuff. So people feel that in these areas, because of the rhetoric that's going on in our country right now, in addition to some of the silly surf dudes that are saying don't come surf here or whatever, or people don't look like I look here, that people are feeling that they shouldn't even chance going to that place because they might be detained for justified or unjustified reasons. So that's a real phenomenon, absolutely. But again, For everybody, and this crosses various groups, on average, we go to the beach a whole heck of a lot. Even though there's some of us that don't go as much as others, it's still a widely present phenomenon. And it's something we've not asked yet, but it comes out anecdotally. Even the folks that don't go to the beach, there's a massive identification with beach culture. So sunglasses, however you want to define that, board shorts and things like that. So a lot of folks identify with, for example, the surfer culture idea way more than actually surf, for example. So this phenomenon, our baked identity is a real thing, whether people go as frequently as some groups or others. So it's getting late. I should probably just think about getting off here. But what I want to end on is saying that, again, we have fantastic media. They do a lot of great job. They're the fourth estate. But if you look at some of the traditional coverage of things like, say, climate change, you get the impression that you can easily get the impression, there's a bunch of people that think climate change isn't real. That is baloney. That is complete baloney. I haven't shown you this here, but this data tracks all of the national data, all the polls that do everybody. We tend to be, on average here in coastal California, we tend to believe a little bit more in climate change than the average population, but all the trends are exactly identical. So let me orient you. So this is time, 2007 to now, and we ask the question, we don't say do people call it, we just say, is climate change a significant threat we should take seriously and deal with? That's all it says. And what we see is we range between 67%, that's driven by national elections. When we have a national election and we have a bunch of people standing up saying lies and untruths about stuff, that tends to drive down the general public's perception. But I just want to note, this doesn't go from 100 to 0. The bottom of the graph here is 60%. So the vast majority of folks right now in 2017, when we did it, it was about 84% of our population think that climate change is a significant threat we need to deal with. When you look through the media, you don't get the perception that 84% of us think that this is a deal. It seems 1-to-1. It seems 50-50. And because we have an administration in the White House right now that is actively full of climate change deniers, reality deniers, science deniers, it can be very debilitating. But don't take that message away. Almost everybody thinks this is a real deal. And our error rate on here, depends on the year, our error rate ranges from 4 to 7%. So that 84%, we can't really distinguish 90% from that, statistically speaking. So the story I always tell my students is in Turkey, I have a project in eastern Turkey, and several years ago I'm in eastern Turkey in a village near the Iranian border, and we're in a falafel shop eating, and my back is to there's a television up in the corner like this. I'm in a table over here, and we're having lunch, and all of a sudden, whoo, it goes super quiet. Everything's quiet. And I look at all my colleagues, and everybody's staring at the television, and I turn around, and it's a Turkish guy reading the news. I don't speak Turkish, so I don't know what the hell he's talking about. And so I'm like, oh my God, is there a bombing or is there some horrible thing or whatever? And everybody's really quiet, and I'm waiting, and the reporter says his spiel, and then finishes, and then everybody starts to go back eating lunch. And I said, hey, what was that? What was that story about? And they said, oh, it was a story on climate change, right? So 99% of the world does not have this weird hang up about is climate change real or not. To be sure, how we deal with it, it's not entirely clear. There's all kinds of pathways we can choose to take. There's wonderful debates we need to have and are having about what's the correct path. But this notion of we can't even begin to talk about it because not everybody agrees is complete fabrication. So don't take away that impression. And again, this data is valuable to make sure people understand that. Anyway, so just to finish up, these are the answers to the things you guys had. Is climate change a problem? In 2016, it was 78% of people said yes. What did you guys put down? What was your answer and your guesses? 67? And nobody else wrote down a number? Excellent, great, okay, good. How about, have you ever avoided going to a beach because you felt unwelcomed? So it was 14% in 0, 10, 14, 5, okay. How about how frequent? So again, monthly was the most common answer there. Did you guys guess monthly on average? What was your most common category on how frequently you thought the public goes to the beach? 70%? Okay. Excellent. Monthly or greater is 67%, so that's pretty good. What was your guess? Is California's ocean health better than 60 years ago? No, dominant one. But what was the guess? How many people, what was the proportion of folks that said no, you guys guessed? 70, 60? Yeah, so 50, it was 46. It was, a little bit less than 50. That's true. We were talking about mean age going to the beach is 4.7. People spending a bit, on average, about $400 a week at the beach. And then these last ones, which we can talk about if you guys want, but it's what do we prefer for beaches? This is really important for our group because we're working on we're inventing an index for how healthy our beaches are across California and across the globe. And so different people have different values. Most people say they like a beach with few people on the beach. Most people like sugary sand as opposed to rocky beaches. Most people like free parking lots. Most people like lots of animals around. Most people like to have a beach that has dogs running around or allows dogs to run around off leash, etc. Most people like a non-groomed beach, a wild beach, a beach that's not been manicured. Most people like a big, broad beach, one that stretches from horizon to horizon, as opposed to a little small pocket beach. Most people, and this was statistically, there's no difference here, but a slightly more than half, but it's not a difference, want concessions. So people don't have a strong feeling about a taco truck or stuff like that. Kids, about 2/3 of the folks like to see kids at the beach. And this is really close. This is statistically significant, but it's pretty close. Good surf breaks, about a bit more than half. All right, you guys like it. I know you guys like it. Versus like just a gentle, nice, mellow, no breaks and stuff like that. About 75% of the people like an easy walk down to the beach as opposed to sort of a cliff kind of walking. And more than half, about 60%, like a beach with no fishing. Again, that gets to the fact that many of us don't fish or hunt. So there you go. So now you know what people think about the coast. Again, we have all kinds of great data, and I'm happy to chat about that data. But in general, you guys can, if you want to learn more, you can go to look at some of our websites. So esrm.zone is our general website for our department. We have an official website that's really kind of ugly and not very attractive. So ESRM Zone is our main website, or you can look at my website, which is piratelab.org, if you want to learn about this or any of the work that we do there. So with that, I'll be quiet because it's late and you guys probably want to get home. But if you want to ask any questions about any of our specific polling data in terms of oil drilling or anything like that, I'm happy to hang out and talk to you guys. But thanks for the opportunity, and thanks to Leechless Brewing for doing this great series.
Any questions for Sean?
Yeah, so the question is how long do we want to run the surveys for? And the answer is as long as we can, right? Yeah. So one of the things our campus, a typical university when I would have come down or Dan Reineman or any of our colleagues, they would do their same research. We have flipped that on its head, and we've actually gone to our community, to you guys, and say, what do you guys need to know? And that's the main driver for what research projects. And in this case, if it was just me, maybe we would have stopped by now. But because folks keep asking us, we'll do it as long as the community sees value in it, I think.
What do you want?
World peace. That's what we want. Just kidding.
Thanks for coming out, guys. Thank you.
So that ends Salty Sessions. Tomorrow, Ventura Land Trust still has a speaker series at the Point City Pavilion. And we have Earth Day on Sunday. Thank you so much for everyone that spoke. Dan, Brian, Kiki, Sean, Dan, Paul, everyone contributed quite a bit to Salty Sessions, and now our job is just to run with it and make sure that which we care a lot about is taken care of. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next time.